So today really is a big deal for our church, really a historic day for our church. A year ago, or about 14 months ago, we launched our ReImagine capital campaign to create more space, to reach more people, and really to write the next chapter in the story of our church. And as I've said before, all of that is made possible because of all the people that wrote the first chapter of our church's story that stepped out to envision something different. And you've heard the phrase by now, I'm sure, but to create an alternative to church as usual for all people and actually mean it. And what we've said so many times is when that group of people stepped out, and it was small, barely bigger than a small group, when they stepped out, it wasn't because our area needed another church. It doesn't, but it needed a different kind of church. I'm more convinced than ever that our community area still desperately needs a different kind of church. And we kind of took our cue from a passage in Acts. And what we recognized from the beginning, if you're kind of new to this whole thing, wasn't about style. Lots of churches with similar styles. But we were going to create a different kind of approach entirely to church and to reaching people. It wasn't about style. It was about a culture. And it was about really a strategy to reach people who are far from God. In this verse in Acts that really has become a lead verse for us, that you probably heard us talk about, do not make it difficult for people who are what? Somehow the church lost sight of this verse somewhere along the way, but this is like the first church as it's getting started. It's like, hey, whatever you do, don't make it hard and difficult unnecessarily for people who are turning to God, which really is all of us at some point along the way, if you're a follower of Jesus. And it's the reality that it is good news of great joy for all people, for skeptics and cynics, for your dad that just walked away and was done with organized religion, your gay brother, your friend who is unchurched, the person who had a terrible experience, or the individual who's struggling with massive doubts and massive questions about faith. Do not make it difficult for people who are turning to God. And so we had a small group of people who came around that idea, not about a style, but around a culture that would take this seriously, that we would excel at answering the questions that they're actually asking when they come to church. And for a lot of them, they would feel welcomed in a part of the church for the first time in a long time, and in some cases, the first time they've ever felt that in their life. That small group of people set out to not make it difficult, and instead to thrive at reaching people who are just done with organized religion. We set out to focus on what is fundamental to following Jesus, and then not have a church where we added a bunch of non-fundamentals that become unnecessary obstacles for people. A church that would be welcoming and accessible for everybody, and that we wouldn't just stencil it on the wall. It would be the culture that permeated everything that we did, that we would actually take seriously serving, sacrificing, and giving to the marginalized and the orphan and the widow and the immigrant and the homeless and the hungry. This is a total side note, but this last couple of weeks, you guys have been on Angel Tree through Red Cross, and you guys gave away or participated in more Angel Tree in terms of kids having a Christmas than any other nonprofit in the Tampa Bay area, like in Hillsborough County. Like you guys did that. Just a complete side note. There was only one other organization, a corporate entity that outdid you guys. Other churches couldn't fulfill their obligations, sent them to you, and you guys took all those as well. Unbelievable. And so a church that took seriously the marginalized in our community, and then a church that would actually value the next generation, and not just value it, would elevate it, believing that the next generation is worth everything. The kids would cry leaving church, not coming to church, that we would provide incredible experiences for middle school and high schoolers, and we would anchor the message of Jesus in their heart, that it would be the safest place for people who had intense doubts or were struggling with their faith, and we would not shut it down. We would create a church that leaned into that we would facilitate progress at people's pace rather than just handing them another set of list of rules or behavioral modification. And I just can't overstate, a group of people wrote that first chapter to do something that is just, and I'll try to emphasize this at the end, it's just not happening in many places. And there's so many, little indicators of what God is doing in those stories. One was a couple weeks ago by Carrie, who's baptized. And maybe you happened to be at the service where she was baptized. Many of you weren't. And so I just want you to check out this story that represents so many other stories.
Next, we have Carrie, who said this. For a long time, I felt like something was missing in my life. I believed in God, but I didn't really know him. And then 2 years ago, tragedy struck my family. My nephew shot my dad, mom, and cousin. My dad didn't survive, and for a while, it was touch and go for my mom. I was devastated and angry. Angry at God, at my nephew, at everything. I couldn't understand how God could let that happen. Sadness, emptiness, and anger took over my life. I tried to move forward on my own, leaning on family, but deep down I was carrying it everywhere I went. Eventually I started thinking about God again, but I didn't know how to approach him. So this summer I took my first step toward healing and began seeing a therapist. When I mentioned my thoughts about seeking religious help, she encouraged me to try a sermon and see what happened. And so I watched a live YouTube sermon from Centerpoint called Made for More, and I felt it. This was it. I could feel God moving in me. I kept coming back, wanting to learn more. I started reading the Bible. That's when I realized that Jesus had been there all along. I didn't have to fix everything or carry the pain alone. He already carried it for me. I accepted Jesus into my life, finally understanding what it meant when he said, "Follow me." Since trusting Jesus, I'm no longer empty. The anger has left, and I'm learning to forgive my nephew, something I know I can only do through Christ. I have peace, hope, and joy I never thought possible. I know now that this life is temporary, and Jesus is the way to eternal life. I am loved, seen, and never alone. I want to thank my husband who's walking this journey with me, and Dale and everyone in the First Steps of Faith group at Centerpoint for their encouragement and support.
Come on, church. That's something to praise.
One of the things we talk about in the all-staff meetings that we do on Mondays, we always share all these stories that we hear over the weekend. And the thing we always bemoan is like, I wish everybody could hear every story of all that God is doing. But that's representative of so many others. And one of the things that many of you don't think about if you helped write the first chapter of our story as a church is that you prepared the way for people like Carrie, and you didn't even know her name, and hundreds of others who've been impacted when you served, you sacrificed, and you gave. So all that to say that group that started all of this, man, God honored that service and that sacrifice and that dreaming and those prayers, and you become one of the most diverse churches in this area, religiously, in terms of background, ethnically, racially, generationally, politically. It's all over the map. About 60% of our church has a recent deconstruction story about walking away from faith or God. In fact, I've been to 2 straight Discover CCs 2 months in a row. And from my recollection, there was one couple, and there were full rooms both times, that had any recent church experience. God is leading so many people to this place that were just done with the church altogether. And so we, about 14 months ago, began to reimagine, as God continued to grow this, what the next step was to create more space to reach more people. And there's a couple things that we talked about as a big deal to us if you weren't here for that 14 months ago. We wanted to create more physical space to reach more people with life and freedom in Jesus, because either we tell people to stop inviting or we create more space. And over the last couple months, especially as we're watching trends where this is not October, November, not peak times, that we've had every couple of weeks, multiple weekends where we have both services in overflow. And so we have to do something. But then the other thing that we've said 14 months ago, this isn't about bigger buildings. We've never got excited about building bigger buildings. This is about joining together to reimagine the next chapter of our story for the sake of our community. Not buildings, but thousands of more stories of life change in our community for people looking for hope. And there are so many people looking for hope that have been turned off or turned away that are looking for a different kind of church in their community. Now, here's what I want to say to some of you. If you're brand new or somebody invited you, this is way different than what I normally do. And so I thought it was important. We just talked to our whole church and kind of where we're at. So I'm going to talk very much to those of you who are a part of CC. But if you're new, I'm so glad you're here, because what I'm going to talk about, especially in a few minutes, is so relevant to you, because you're going to get a little glimpse over the next few minutes in terms of what we are all about as a church. And we don't want anything from you. In fact, over the next few minutes, I hope that you understand that what we're doing as a church and what we've continued to step out to do is actually for the sake of you, for the sake of your family, for the sake of maybe your neighbor or your friend or your family member that walked away from church a long time ago. But 14 months ago, we set out and we asked 3 big questions that we had to answer in terms of the next phase for our church and creating more space. The first question was this: how do we create more space to reach more people as economically as possible while providing a great experience? Like, we wanted to continue to provide a great experience for middle schoolers and high schoolers and kids and for adults, but our goal is to reach the community, and we wanted to be great stewards and be as economical as possible. Our second question was, how do we maximize our space in the community? for the 80% of the time the church isn't using the facilities. This is a big deal to me, a conversation I've had with a lot of other church leaders. I think every church needs to try to answer this question if we really are serious about this, but it causes us sometimes to be uncomfortable. But one of the things that we tried to do when we moved into this facility a few years ago is try to figure out the answer to this question to be great stewards. And then the third question, how do we create community partnership to reach more people and achieve the two above goals? Because our goal is to be for the community and create as many partnerships in the community as we can. So 14 months ago, we laid out the plan to partner with Pathways Learning Academy. When we moved into this facility, we had several options. We were looking to partner with either some kind of charter school or a daycare that would be missional in using our facilities when we weren't, which is just good stewardship, and be an outreach into the community. And initially that worked, and then it hit occupancy issues on their side and licensing issues on their side. And so we had to delay that significantly. But 14 months ago, we laid out the plan that they would move in and then we would retrofit this auditorium if you were a part of that or have you seen the information. We'd build a new lobby. We'd have to build onto our children's space on normal, like non-holiday weeks and just even non-peak seasons. We're over 80% capacity every single weekend. And now it's sped up to about every 3-4 weeks. We're in overflow in both of our services. And we are well over 80% capacity in our kids' environment. I said this to you before, and it won't maybe mean anything to you. But the average equivalent of kids' attendance to adults for a typical church is about 15%. Ours is 45 to 50% every weekend. And so there's a ton in terms of you reaching the next generation and families with young kids. And so that was our plan 14 months ago with a total cost of $5 million, which is a ton of money. That would retrofit this, build a new lobby, add on to our kids' space to give us what we needed long term. Our goal was to raise a good portion of that and then finance part of that and be really wise as we possibly could. This is a ton of money. When we started, it was 10 million, and we're like, that's not gonna work for us. And so we got to figure out different options. That led us to, okay, how do we maximize our space? So we started looking at retrofit. And then when PLA kind of hit a dead end, we started to pray again, okay, well, like what does God have next for us? Or where does God want to lead us into this next phase? And so I'm about to share with you that we were able to cut that in half again, a little more in half. And here's the thing that we knew real quick, just to give you some backstory. We knew with the kind of church that we were creating that we would have to figure out creative ways to fund creating more space to reach more people. We have a ton that have been turned off from the church. They're coming back. I get it. Done with organized religion. We don't have a lot of, like our church is not made up of 70% church people. You grew up in the deal, you tithe. This is not our church. More and more we reach a lot of economically disadvantaged that are a part of our church. And so we knew we just had to get creative. And to just make this statement so we're real clear, because this is what we set out to do from the very beginning for our church. We decided we will never make decisions about the people that we reach based on what they gave financially. And unfortunately, a lot of churches do this. And if I can just add a never to this, just to make my point. In fact, I shouldn't go off my notes too much, but an early conversation I had was within months of starting the church, and we were really small. I had several people like, this is never gonna work in this area. And I got all of that, and so very little giving. And I had a directional team member that called me over person, kind of, a church person. I don't say that derogatory. I'm a church person, okay? I grew up in the deal. But they were like, all in, knew the verses, brought a big Bible. And they were a little bit upset about the diversity of all the people we're reaching. And they're like, well, they're going to leave and take their money with them. And I don't know where this thought came from, but it set the tone for the coming years for our church. And I just told this directional team member, like, I get it. I hate that. But we're never going to allow people to buy influence here in a way that compromises our mission to reach people. So we're never going to make decisions because just straight talk, like there's easier and better financial models for churches to not create the kind of diversity, a little more homogenous and whatever. That's never been our goal. So we started to think about what does that look like for us. And so to try to tell a long story short, in May, I met an incredible lady by the name of Teresa, who is the CEO of an organization called HEAT. And some of this got leaked to a paper that didn't have the details right. So if you think you know, you probably don't know what I'm about to say. So we met, and it was just a quick drive-by. And I'm gonna tell you what she leads in just a second. But it's a quick drive-by. She, in the sphere that she's involved in, it's very diverse in terms of like everybody is invited in, and it's people from all over the community, all types of backgrounds. And she knew that we had a church and we're creating a church very similar to that. And they were completely out of space with what they were doing. She knew that we were increasingly out of space as well, that we had moved into this facility from another facility. How many of you have been with us all the way from Miller and Durant days, just real quick, in the house? Like, yeah, few of you. Moved here a few years ago, had a ton more space, triple the land, and then quickly began to, especially after COVID, to fill up once again, and we knew we had to make a next move. And so I was talking to her, and she just floated the idea, is there a way? I mean, kind of to get creative, and it's a little unorthodox, that we could partner in some way and create the space that we need, and you could do the same and do it much more economically for both of us. And I'm just at the point, and some of you are like this, because I've seen God do so many things. I'm constantly just paying attention to what God's gonna do next and what door God's gonna open next. So I return a lot of phone calls of crazy ideas to, let me just hear you out. And so I was like, well, we should meet. And I was super interested in what she had to say, but I was like 3 days into a sabbatical, the first one I ever taken. So I called my friend Gavin Adams, who works with our staff, and I was like, hey, I just set up all these meetings with her, I think we should. And he's like, dude, you're 3 days into a sabbatical. You can't start setting up meetings to meet about all this stuff. That's all you'll do. So I canceled them, and I'm like, and my personality is not good with this. Like, I'm just gonna have to wait for the next few weeks and just pray and see what God does. And so anyway, she got an email or sent me an email during that time. And she's like, well, I think another opportunity opened up. And so when I got back, I saw it. I'm like, okay, well, that shuts that door and, answers that prayer indirectly. And then immediately she gets back to go, actually, the door closed on that. I'd really like to talk. And so we began to talk about what this would look like. So real quick, Teresa is the CEO of HEAT. We had from the very beginning looked at a charter school or a daycare, as I said earlier, that would just be a good use of our facilities, but also be an outreach. It functions like a charter school. It's actually a homeschool co-op that's become the biggest in this area. They have about 1,000 families, not kids, 1,000 families who are part of this thing. And they're diverse in terms of everybody is invited. So they have, people that are Christians that are part of it, Muslim families, unchurched families, all over the area. In fact, after I'm talking about this, you'll drive around this week and see little HEAT magnets on cars everywhere, now that you're aware of it. But it's one of the largest in Hillsborough County. And they're reaching families from all over the place. They're very different in terms of they have classes on site all day, every day, all throughout the week. And so we began to talk about what that would look like. They were completely out of space. We're completely out of space. And so we began to talk and to meet with our teams and to pray about what God would maybe have us to do, because it checked a couple boxes. The 80% of the time that our facilities are not being used, the property that is not being used most of the time, outreach into the community with 1,000 plus families, very diverse, many of them unchurched, de-churched in the area, which is a part of our heart, and just being great stewards and economically being what we are as a church and the people we're trying to reach. How can we even cut our costs more significantly? So can I just bottom line it for you? And then we'll take questions. I'm kidding. I'm not going to take any questions. You kidding me? And there'll be a chance for questions, but we'll give you an email. HEAT, this organization, will buy our current auditorium where you're at right now, and stay with me all the way to the end. And I have a friend in here somewhere, and I'm not going to call her out. I was at their home a couple weeks ago, and I was explaining this to her because I was just kind of practicing. I got it done. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I have worked really hard since then, and I hope, Brandy, that I'm better at this one I tried to tell you a few weeks ago. He will buy our current auditorium at a sale price of about $3 million. They will convert this into we have a lot of offices in here. They will convert them all into classroom space, and then this was built for a gym, and so they will retrofit a gym into this space where you're at right here. And then contractually, we worked out a deal. And what I want to say, as I said the first service, as we talk to our staff, there's still stuff that we're wrapping up with this, but we're so far down the road. And there's always a risk in me doing this, but we all felt like it was better to talk about this and just kind of give you a direction about where we're going rather than wait to the end of the year, and we're already there. And so we're not 100% there, but we're far enough down this road as we put all this together that we just want to talk about it as a church. But they will retrofit this into a gym and classrooms, and then contractually we have an agreement where we will use the space Because the 80% of the time they're using the space, we don't use the space. And the space that we need for additional kids space, we will use on the weekends for CC Kids and for CC students on Wednesday night, which means this building and our current CC Kids building eventually will be devoted entirely to next gen ministry for CC Kids, middle school, and high school, because we think the faith of the next generation is worth everything. In the meantime, Heat will lease our current CC Kids space. And in fact, that's already done. And they, with PLA not being able to get their occupancy agreements, they will move in January. They will use this space for sports, for classrooms, Monday through Friday in CC Kids, which again, we'll utilize when we're not utilizing it. And then, when I tell you what I'm about to tell you, they will eventually move into this space and retrofit it. So the next step for us is we will construct, as a result, a new auditorium and lobby for a total cost, center point, of $2 million, which is a lot of money, but we started at 10, and with the sale of this, which there will be a ground lease, and then, so we will own the land, but they will officially own the building, but then we'll use it for all the ministries that we need. And then we will build this, a total cost will be $5 million, but with that sale, total $2 million. Before we were raising and then we were financing part of it. Now it is total, like out the door, tax tag and fees, $2 million on that construction of a new auditorium, a new lobby, which means our goal, and it's a very reasonable goal for our size, even with our demographic, is by the time we finish construction and we will begin construction, that we will be either completely debt-free on that space or very close to debt-free on that space. And because we're able to construct this basically from scratch, we want to build part of it with that larger lobby into some things that can be a community space for other stuff. Again, wanting to be for the community and intersect with the community. Look very similar to plans that we had shown you before, approximately 900 seat auditorium, which is about double where we're at, much larger auditorium. And then to just give you a quick pick about where this is going to go, this is where you're at right now, and it's just on the other side of that playground, and then this is CC Kids, and so this is where that lobby, auditorium, and some office space would go right here. Is that everybody tracking with that? Yeah. Okay, and so our goal from the beginning has been, again, to utilize as best we can. And I'll just say this, if you're at the place where like, I'm skeptical and done with organized religion, so many people in that place, we don't want anything from you. In fact, in a very real sense, and I mean this, we're doing this for you, for your family, to reach more people in the city. And if you never give a dime here, a lot of people don't, if you don't ever give a dime here, you know what we're gonna do? Keep investing in your family, investing in your marriage, providing extraordinary environments for your kids. There's about 20% that fund this week in and week out consistently. So we are all about reaching people in the city. And in fact, many of you who've been around here know the only thing that we've had a capital campaign for ever until ReImagine was to raise money to give it away into partner communities in this area. So, but we want to be as economical as possible. We've raised the last year about $1 million. About half of that has come in, and a lot of that's for soft cost, as it's referred to, of all of the permitting, all of the plans, all of the stuff to get to the place to be able to construct this. In essence, let me put this one other way. We will obtain the use of $9 million worth of facilities for $2 million in terms of what Centerpoint will contribute. This building, the whole entire CC Kids building, will all be middle school, high school, and kids with the new auditorium. And so we will far less money, literally saving millions with far more space than we had originally planned and would even be able to construct. And the reason we're doing this is because we are stewards of what God has given us. We're not owners. And so this checks all the boxes real quick. Create more space to reach more people as economically as possible. Great spaces, but also at a fraction of the cost. To maximize our space for the community during the 80% of the time the church isn't using the facilities. I'm so passionate about every church figuring out how to do this, whatever that looks like for them. I've never liked the idea since we moved into the space of having millions of dollars worth of facilities that just sit vacant. And then the third thing is to create a partnership to reach more people and achieve these goals. This is 1,000+ families, many of them all over the place in this community in terms of faith and religion and church. Our plan is to begin construction in the fall of 2026. This is dependent really solely on permitting and to complete construction by the fall of 2027. So, and God opens doors and closes doors, but as it currently sits in the coming weeks and finalizing this, we will move forward this next year with beginning the construction of that new auditorium to ultimately lead us to move in by around fall of 2027. All right, any questions? All right. And there legitimately will be opportunity for questions, but just not here. And here's the thing that I said 14 months ago. We want every single one of you to be involved. If you've already been involved in ReImagine, like you took one of these a year ago and prayed and gave, or you're in the midst of giving over a 2-year period, continue to do what you're doing. It's making a huge impact. For others of you, many of you are new. Some of you are away this weekend with Thanksgiving, but you're watching online. Many of you are new to our church. This is your opportunity to step in, to literally, like those who wrote the first chapter, to help us write the next chapter of this story and to reach people that nobody else is reaching. And some are in a very difficult place, can't give anything, but you can pray and you can be invested in that way. Others of you could fund large portions of this, if not all of it. Others of you, like this is an opportunity to stretch your faith, but our goal is that every single CC over the next couple of years will be able to look back and go, I was a part of that. And I laid the groundwork for everything that God would do. There's a pledge card on your seat. And so if you are not a part yet, I just want to encourage you to just figure out, to pray about what God would have you to do. These are like one-time gifts, or they're multiple gifts over a 2-year period. So this is just between now and the end of 2027 to give toward ReImagine. And our goal is that by the end, even the end of this year, next 5 weeks, that we would raise about half of those pledges. Again, not money in hand, but pledges over these next 2 years. And it's a real possibility and goal. And we're going to begin construction this next year, but goal that we would have this paid off by the time we get to the end of 2027. And if you're new, we don't want anything from you. You don't need to give at all. But man, my hope is what I want to talk about in the next few minutes, that you would lean in to why we're doing this and why we're creating a church like this. Now, last question real quick. What do we do until then? Because this is about a 2-year window, and we're going to go as quick as we can, but it's a 2-year window. We're launching a third service during peak times, and then we'll see from there, meaning to start with January and February at peak times. We're already in non-peak times as we've watched these trends, October, November, bunch of services where we've been in overflow. So January, February, we're adding a third service, 9 a.m., 10:45, so you just barely, have to change. And then 12:30, and this is the express service, just so you know. Which means it's going to be 45 minutes. Some my staff didn't want me to call it that, but it's an express service. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of time. And there will be no regular CC kits. It'll be a little bit different service, but there will be nursery for up to 2 years or to 2 years and younger. So 9, 10:45, 12:30. We know that 12:30 is a specific demographic. So what we're asking is for 75 adults, just to start with, that would go, hey, for January and February, this is not for life. January and February, if you serve at a service, keep serving at the service you serve. But January and February, I'm going to be an early adopter. I'm going to do what those people did that wrote the first chapter of this church's story, and I'm going to do for others what others did for me. I'm going to create more space during this time. And so there's a couple people this is for. Now, some of you, you've been attending the express service for a long time. Because you're 15 minutes late every week, and it's fine. So if you move to 12:30, you're gonna want to be on time, or you'll miss the whole thing. But so that might be a good place to go. You're an empty nester. Your kids have sports all the time, sports on Sunday morning. We've heard from a lot of those, or who have crazy work schedules. You just like to sleep in. I don't know what your season of life is, but if you're in one of those seasons of life, we need you to jump, if at all, if you can, and commit. January, February, I'll attend this service. Again, this will help free up space when we need to free up space, and we just need some early adopters. Go to third service launch on the CC homepage. You can even do it right now. I won't get offended. Go right now. I'm in. We're in. If you can. And it would be awesome by this week, next week, whatever, that we've already got at least 75 to help launch that service. And that's going to help bridge the gap. I'm sure it's not the only thing we're going to do over the next 2 years as we look at kind of where we're trending, but it's where we're going to start in January and February. All right? So with that, I want to end by just casting a little bit of vision and just talking to you about why this is so important. And some of the things even God's doing behind the scenes that you wouldn't even know about. You just attend, and maybe your life is being impacted, but you don't know fully all that God's doing. But I just want to cast a little bit of vision about why this is so important, about why we can't stop, why we can't get complacent, why we can't get distracted, and why we need to keep moving forward. At the heart of following Jesus, all throughout the scriptures, is making disciples, or literally multiplying followers of Jesus. And we made a decision, this is going to sound kind of bad, but we made a decision when we started the church that we would be less concerned about keeping people and more concerned about reaching people. And all I mean by that is that we would not sacrifice the mission of Jesus to make Christians comfy. And there's a lot of churches, without being critical, that have moved toward country club church, where everybody looks the same, everybody's comfortable, but they're not reaching anybody outside of their sphere. And we were so committed. We are so committed to removing every unnecessary barrier because so many people have walked away from the church and it wasn't Jesus. Every unnecessary barrier to people finding life and finding freedom in Jesus. And what you're doing right now is so important. And I just want to brag on you for just a second because all of you who are serving and sacrificing and praying, seriously, and volunteering, you're doing this. You're creating this. Churches are not built on the talents of a few, but the sacrifices of the many. You're driving this forward. And so just to give you a little window into what's happening, many of you don't know that we're a part of a church network called the Irresistible Church Network that was birthed out of Atlanta and North Point, and now it's a network all over the country and with 4 global partners. And for whatever reason, over the last couple of years, in ways that we could not have imagined, because we're just a church from Valrico, to quote them who are part of this network, we have become thought leaders in this Irresistible Church Network, which means that because of what you're doing, which you don't realize a lot of times, because again, churches have similar styles. You get into their church, you attend, same kind of music, whatever. But the culture that you're creating, in terms of 60% of you have a recent deconstruction story, and we're all over the map in terms of religious background, political, economical, even growing, especially for Valrico, ethnically, racially. And so we have a bunch of churches in this network that we are coaching and sharing content and sharing strategy in terms of what we're doing and how they can create this kind of church in their context. We've spoken at the Irresistible Church Conference. This is the largest outward-facing church network now in the country, which means it's a network that's doing what no other network is doing or denomination because they're creating churches that inspire Jesus followers to grow in their faith, but also create churches that are easy for outsiders to attend and begin to track with Jesus. And for whatever reason, the last couple of years, we got on the radar. And we're coaching churches all over the country, from Texas to Georgia to Pennsylvania to, I don't know if I mentioned Wisconsin and New York and New Jersey and New Hampshire and several others. In fact, I'll give you a couple examples. You know the 4th Sunday for the City thing that you guys do every single week if you've been a part of this? We shared that at a conference where they're talking about what are some of the strategies you're using, how are you helping your community? And that, no joke, is being used by churches all over the country. And they got it from you. And I get emails now regularly because we spoke on, hey, I just wanted to tell you, don't know me, but I want to tell you about what's happening and what's happened in our church and the money that we've raised for nonprofits. The other thing is the Life Stage Gathering, which originated from our executive pastor, Angela, shared that recently with a bunch of church leaders. Bunch of churches are using those strategies and reaching people and how to create a context for unchurched people who are far from God. So a lot of our time now is coaching churches and coaching leaders and how to create an alternative to church as usual in their context, which is unbelievable. In fact, we added this last minute, but I had no idea when we were in New York for a recent conference. I was asked to shoot a video about some of what you're doing, and I didn't find this out till this weekend. But that video that I shot this morning, I think there's a screen cap of it. I look kind of angry for whatever reason, but is being shown at all North Point campuses and a bunch of our networks around the country about what you're doing in Valrico, Florida, to create an alternative to church as usual for all. It's unbelievable. When we could have never imagined we started. We're coaching a bunch of churches in our area as well, most recently Cypress Meadows, that was over for a physical visit at our campus and just to talk with our staff, and 2 other requests this week. And then one more thing, and I'll move on. But I want you to know what you are a part of, which we never could have envisioned. A very influential church. We're not the biggest. In fact, we've given up growth to create a more diverse church. You're in the top 2% numerically of churches in the country. That has never been our goal, though. But you have become a very influential church and a very influential network reaching outsiders all over the country. And in fact, we were just asked to partner with a global network. We have now 4 that are a part of our network. And the partner church that they asked us to help in their context was Lakeside Church and their pastor, Rich Vernon, which is an incredible dude. And they are in Southport, UK. And so I'll be going over there sometime the first part of this year. And now I don't know anything about the UK, so they got to figure out in their contact. But we've been asked to help coach them in terms of transferable principles in what you're doing to create an alternative to church as usual in the UK in Southport. So my point is just what you're doing is incredible, and many of you have no idea because you have a life and job, and you show up, and you know it's impacted you, but you have no idea what's happening with so many other churches. And then one last story, I met with an African-American pastor just recently who's become a friend, and he is ministering in an inner city context and came to kind of ask a bunch of questions about what we're doing. And again, context is everything. Some of you just don't understand the fact that you're in Valrico and what's happening through this church. So now this is his quote, but my African-American friend who pastors in the inner city, here's what he said to me. We pastor in the hood. And then he said, how are you creating your church and your volunteers, this kind of church in Valrico? How is that happening in terms of economic diversity and reaching huge population in the LGBT plus community, which has not made us very popular, and ethnic diversity and racial diversity? How is this happening in Valrico, and how can we be a part of it? So all I want to say is thank you for serving, thank you for sacrificing, thank you for being all in, and I just want to encourage you that our area needs what you are doing in our community more than it has ever needed it before. That what you are doing is special. Many of you have your own stories about what God is doing. And I want to just close with this, because this is what I've been talking to a bunch of church leaders about, coaching, speaking, writing about, is about this dynamic right now. Over the last decade, again, you maybe don't pay attention to this, but over the last decade, the church in our nation has grown much more fundamental, and I don't mean that in a positive way, and much more exclusive. And it's kind of circled the wagons on some old ways of thinking and doing things that has alienated so many outsiders in our community and many other communities around the nation, which is what our network is all about and what we have been asked to be a part of to help coach other churches. And one of the biggest things that I see that I'm talking to other leaders about over and over again is that churches and church leaders are talking about unchurched people rather than talking to them. And they're talking about them negatively. One of the things that we say behind the scenes every weekend here is that we assume that you're in the room. We assume that you're in the room, which means every weekend we're thinking about the Jesus follower and inspiring them to go deep in their faith and follow Jesus. It's not the expense of depth, but then we're thinking about the person who's been turned off to faith, who walked away, not sure if they believe, tons of questions. That's why every week you'll hear me say things like, hey, if you didn't sign on to the Jesus thing, you're not obligated to do any of this thing. You never agreed to follow Jesus. Or hey, here's some big questions you might want to consider, or here's what is seemingly weird about the scripture, and I just pointed out because you're already thinking about it, and we assume you're in the room. So I just want to say this to some of you in the house or online. If you're investigating faith, and we have so many every weekend, you're wondering if there's a place for you. You left faith a long time ago. Your mom dragged you here, and you didn't really want to come because she said it was different. Every weekend, in every environment, we plan our messages and our services with you in mind, and you are valued, and you are welcomed, and there is a place for you here. And you need to know that. Because somehow, and this is what I'm having a lot of conversations about, people in our communities and religious leaders see people outside of the faith suddenly, especially over the last decade, as a threat to our community. And even worse, if I can just boil down on what so many churches are facing, is that churches and church leaders are creating churches for church people who vote the same way that they do, and creating these homogenous little gatherings. And without recognizing, they're saying to half of their population in their community, you are not welcomed here. And this is, you're fine. This is offensive, I appreciate it, to the message of Jesus, where suddenly political affiliation is a test for orthodoxy. And so many religious leaders, just go on TikTok or Instagram, are demonizing and criticizing people outside of faith. And it's so funny, the last couple of Discover CCs, we have a meal, we talk to people around the room. I mean, over and over again, it feels like 75% of the stories are these kind of stories. And suddenly they're finding a home here. Winning elections in a lot of churches and with a lot of leaders has taken precedence over winning people. The mission field has become a battlefield, and pastors are viewing their neighborhoods as left and right. And politics and the message of Jesus is getting interwoven together where they can't even see the difference any longer. And I just want to say this to you as we look at the next step in the next chapter of our church. We have refused to do this, and we will continue to refuse to do this. Because our community, our neighborhood, the churches that we're coaching around the nation, we're going to view them and our community is the way that Jesus did, lost and found. Amen. What you're doing in your community right now is more important than it has ever been before to create a different kind of church. And some of you, if your life has been impacted in a significant way here, aren't you glad that we cared less about who you voted for and more about who you have faith and trust in terms of relationship? In fact, we didn't care about any of that other stuff, but just who you put your faith and your trust in, that in our community, we need churches that I've talked about so often that embody the tone and the posture and the approach of Jesus' kingdom message, a kingdom that is for everybody. And there are so many churches that have doubled down into old ways, and they're comfortable, and everybody looks exactly alike, and they vote exactly alike, and theologically look exactly alike, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people in their communities who are far from God. We need more churches, and we're so committed to this, and church leaders that represent the tone and the posture and the approach of the father in the story of the prodigal son, if you know that story. Jesus one day told a story to kind of represent, here's what God the Father is like, and here's how God the Father sees people who are far from God. And in that story, if you know it, the son comes to this father and basically says, I wish you were dead. That's the essence of what he said. Since you're not, can you just give me your inheritance and I'm just going to go live it up? And so he got the inheritance, went off, spent it all, gambled it away, did whatever he did. Got to the lowest point you could imagine in dysfunction and mess and no money and as lost, as hopeless as he could have ever imagined. And there's a point in the story where he gets so rock bottom that he starts to miss home. But he's not sure that home is missing him. And some of you have been there, haven't you? First time you walked into a church, first time you walked in here after a decade of being away, you sat in the back in case you had to do a quick escape. You said things like, oh, I might burst into flames if I walked in, or I've heard all these stories, can I have a connection with God? Is there a place for me as whatever? You dare not lose that feeling. Because other people need to experience what you've experienced. And we should do everything that we can to invite them in. Here's how Luke records the story where Jesus is telling the story. There was religious leaders there, tax collectors and sinners. They're all listening to him. And he's about to tell the story about what God the Father is like and how he responds to people far from God. And he says, but while he was still a long way off, meaning the son finally starts to come home, wondering if home will accept him. And his father did what? Because the father was looking for him. Because the father would go out on the road every single day waiting for his son to come home. Meaning the father was ready for him. And the father wasn't angry. The father didn't view the prodigal son as an enemy. If you feel like you're too far gone and God could never, and I don't know, and if you knew my past, you just need to know God is not angry with you. You are not an enemy. God is heartbroken. And while he was still a long way off, he saw him. And this should characterize every single church, about every single person in our community. And he was filled with what? Compassion. And then if you know the story, the father's like, we got to celebrate because my son's home. Get the fatted calf out, break open the good wine, not the box stuff, the good wine. Let's go. Let's celebrate big. Get a DJ. We're going to go all out. And everybody who's listening to Jesus' story, because you got the self-righteous religiously, they're like, what? He hasn't even said he's sorry yet. We should put him on probation first. Let's see if he really means it. And then all the sinners and tax collectors who could relate are still like, well, that's absurd. Nobody would do that. And everybody's confused, including the older brother in the story. They're like, my younger brother does not deserve a party. I mean, he squandered all of the wealth. He's dysfunctional. He's a mess. And the father's like, no. We've got to celebrate. For this son of mine is dead, or was dead, and now he's alive. He was lost he was lost in relationship with me. And now he's found. So they began to celebrate. That's how God views people who are disconnected from him. So we're going to keep our eyes on the road. We're going to keep looking for and creating a place for people who wonder whether they can come home. People who wonder whether there is a space for them. And we're going to keep challenging and going deep to press Jesus followers to grow in their faith and live out their faith. But you can't do that without looking to the community to multiply followers of Jesus. We're going to be an outward-facing movement to our community. Republican, Democrat, black, brown, white, messed up, screwed up. Our community needs this church more than ever. So as a result, we're going to create more physical space to reach more people who are looking for an alternative to church as usual. And then in a way we never could imagine, we're going to continue as best we can to help other churches do the same thing. And we cannot stop. We cannot get comfortable. We cannot get distracted. We have an extraordinary opportunity in front of us that we would have never dreamed of. Let me just be personal to you. You need to do for somebody else what somebody else has done for you somewhere along the line. And then for some of you, it's even more personal. You need to do for a middle schooler or a high schooler or a marriage that's hanging on by a thread, or somebody who's got big questions about faith or walked away or is just so done with the church and has seen horrendous things done in the name of Jesus. You need to do for somebody else what you wish somebody had done for you. What you wish that somebody had done for your parents when they were in the church. What you wish somebody had done for your adult kid that maybe walked away from faith. We get to do for somebody else what somebody else did for us. And in 2 years, by God's grace, we're moving to that new facility. And people are going to go public with their faith like Carrie in the waters of baptism. And multiplicatively, marriages are going to be healed and people are going to find worth in Christ. Some people are going to get help for mental illness because we talk about it so much, and are literally physically going to be saved from suicide. And some are going to, for the first time, because they've never felt this in church before, they're going to be awakened to God's relentless, unending, never runs out love. And we're going to look back and say, I was a part of writing that chapter, that second chapter, or I could have been a part of writing that chapter. And then I just want to close with this. Something that I say often, but is so true. You have no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to trust God. You have no idea. You have no idea for you personally what God wants to do through you as you engage in this campaign, or you take a step of faith, or other areas of your life where you're a little bit nervous. I've experienced this so many times in my life and in leadership where I've got a step and it's a little unnerving and it is risky and I'm not sure what God is going to do on the other side. And I have watched God meet me there so many times, because in a lot of cases, God meets you with his power and his presence in the midst of obedience and in the midst of acts of faith, not beforehand. So I just want to encourage you. 14 months ago, we had no idea what God was going to do. I don't think we still have a picture of what God's going to do in the next few years, but you have no idea what hangs in the balance of your decision to trust him. Would you guys stand with me all over the house? And let me just pray over us, over this next season, about what God is going to do. Jesus, thank you so much for that small group of people early on that pioneered to create a different kind of church. Again, not style-wise necessarily, but man, what's happening here in terms of the culture being created? I mean, already today, the number of stories that people wanted to come forward with about how they have been impacted, about how they were done with church, done with God, done with religion. And we don't take any credit for that. You have done all of this, and we are simply stewards of it. Thank you that we get to do this. And I pray that you would give us more faith in the coming season than we've had in the previous season. And that, God, we just wouldn't lose sight. We wouldn't double down. We wouldn't circle the wagons like so many churches and go back into old ways and exclusive habits because it's easier, or economically it's more viable, or whatever the practical reasons. God, give us a heart to keep looking at the road, welcoming and ready for people who are missing home. And they're wondering whether home's missing them. God, individually give us the courage to know what to do about how you want us to individually, corporately participate in where you're leading us as a church. And then just give us the courage to do it. And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.